All right, thank you, NatalCon. Fantastic to be here. And let me say, I've written a bunch of books, but this book I'm going to talk about today is the only one that I'm convinced has actually improved the world, because there are hundreds of people who have had additional kids because of this book. Hundreds is nowhere near enough to actually change any statistical outcome, but if you do the usual economist thing of saying a life's worth $10,000 or $10 million, then this book generated billions of dollars of value, albeit not for me, but that's my gift. All right, so let's get started. You may have heard that parents in America are miserable. If you go to the data, that is not true. However, I do in my book say it's true that parents endure a lot of needless unhappiness. They are less happy than they could be, and this is especially true today because we have so many better ways of making the parenting experience good. Right, so why is it needless? Because contrary to almost everyone, the effects of what we call upbringing or parenting or nurture are actually much smaller than most people believe, especially in the long run, as long as we're talking about rich countries, and we're in a rich country right now. It's obviously true that traits do run in families, but it turns out that the reason is almost entirely what we call heredity or genes or nature. Next slide. All right, so this is all very abstract, so let me start off with a series of pictures, and you may know one of these three people here. All right, so Patrick Friedman on the right is here in attendance. He's not in the room, is he? Anyway, so on the left, we've got Milton Friedman, child of immigrants. In the center, we have David Friedman, his son. And then on the right, we have his grandson, Patri. All right, if you take a look at them, you will immediately notice a strong physical resemblance. The picture, however, hides a lot of how similar they physically are. I did get Milton Friedman's autograph on Capitalism and Freedom, and Milton was very short, and I was thinking, well, it must be because he grew up in a poor immigrant family. And then I met Patri. Patri's the same height as Milton. It's like, I was wrong. It was not malnutrition. It was not growing up in a poor family. It is the Friedman genes for being short. Now, if you keep looking at them and know something about these three gentlemen, you'll also know they're all brilliant economists, all fantastic at math. Keep adding it up. These are all psychological similarities between the three as well. So you can see, why are they so similar? The normal view is basically the physical similarity is genetics and the psychological similarity is upbringing. But is that really the actual story? How do we know that that's what's going on? Maybe it's actually that you grow up the wrong way and you're short, on the other hand, or the right way and you're short. Or maybe, on the other hand, it's possible that psychological traits could actually be highly genetic. Slide. All right. How could we know? Throughout the history of thought, people have been out 3,000 years of arguing about nature versus nurture, and very few of the arguments rise above the level of, I feel that it's nurture that's really important. No, I feel it's nature that's really important. Well, we'll just have to agree to disagree. All right. You can read John Stuart Mill, very smart guy, and yet his argument really just consists in asserting the conclusion and saying that anyone who disagrees is dumb. Like, all right, that's not really a very good way to resolve the issue. How could we resolve the issue more effectively in a more reasonable way? Well, starting around 1960, their researchers realized, like, the reason why we've struggled to go and figure this out is that in a typical family, we blend nature and nurture seamlessly. Typical siblings, they grow up in the same household, they're biological siblings, and they also share half their genes. Therefore, it is very hard to disentangle these two things that are entangled almost all of the time. But what researchers realized 60 years ago, or it's like 70 years ago now, is that there is actually a way you can do it, and that is to study atypical families. While almost all families share nature and nurture, there are some that don't. There are some people are adopted, and then we can see they share nurture but not nature. Also, we've got the convenient natural experiment of twins, because there's two kinds of twins. There are identical twins, like my first two sons, who share all their genes, and then there are fraternal twins that only share half. They're like ordinary siblings, which is why identical twins always have the same sex, but fraternal twins can just as easily be opposite sex. So what researchers realized is let's go and study the atypical families, and this will answer what thousands of years of just asserting your view as fact has not done. All right, so these are the shocking findings. This is not work that I have done, rather what I did is synthesis. So when I was writing the book, I really made an effort to just track down all the research using adoption and twin methods to sort out nature versus nurture on all the traits that parents really care about. The studies that I ignore are ones where they just look at family resemblance and call it nurture. So those, garbage, and don't talk about them. So I'm only looking at the subset that are what are called genetically informed, where you are open to the possibility that the reason for family resemblance is nature rather than nurture. But of course, that's mere openness. It doesn't have to be that way. So here is the quick punchline of what it was at the time about 60 years worth of research, which is this. Heredity explains almost all family resemblance, especially in the long run. Heredity explains almost all family resemblance, especially in the long run. We see as identical twins are much more similar than fraternal twins, even though it's not true that families go to identical twins and say, you're identical twins, you have to be the same, you're required to be the same. It is not that they are being pressured to be the same, they are naturally very much alike, although of course not perfect. Even height is not exactly the same for identical twins. All right. Adoptees, another really important group to study. They mildly resemble their adopting families when they're kids, but most similarity vanishes by adulthood. This is most clear for measures of intelligence. If you go and test the intelligence of adoptees when they're 7, they have a moderate resemblance to their adopting family, but by the time they are between 18 and 21, that has disappeared, and they now their intelligence is only predicted by the intelligence of their biological family. The slogan that I like is this: kids are not like clay that you mold for life. Rather, kids are like flexible plastic bottles. If I had one, I would flex it right now, such that you can change them, but if you release the pressure, and that's what becoming an adult is the releasing of parental pressure to be a certain way. When you release the pressure, it pops back into its original natural shape. Slide. All right. Now, there's another book that is very similar to mine in a lot of ways called The Nurture Assumption by Judith Harris. But the problem with her book is that she focuses very much on personality measures and say that parents don't have much effect on personality. And there I think the obvious response is, well, of course parents don't affect personality much, because what kind of a horrible parent would try to determine their child's personality? It's like, you're going to be an introvert. You're going to be low in conscientiousness, right? That is not what parents generally do. Personality is exactly the kind of thing that most parents, not only officially, but in general, they just do tell him, well, he's got a different personality. It's not my place to say what's the good personality. So what I wanted to do is to redo Harris's book, but to start with a list of stuff that parents almost always do want to change, and then track down the relevant evidence, and then report what the evidence says. All right, so this is what I call the parental wish list. These are things where almost all parents do have a preference about this. They care, and they want to make it happen. All right, so the first one is just health. Health, which we do try to affect even prenatally, with prenatal vitamins, that kind of thing. You try to get your kids to brush their teeth. That's dental health. You try, or maybe don't try, to get them vaccinated. Make them exercise. All of these things. Teach them to eat right. Right? These are all things that parents are doing in order to go and improve their children's health. And almost everybody does this kind of thing. Secondly, intelligence. Again, something that people even do try to affect prenatally, not only with vitamins, but also with the Mozart effect, which is totally bogus, by the way, and also multiply bogus in that it isn't even based upon the study people think it's based on. But anyway, people try to make their kids smarter. I'm going to read to my child. I'm going to enrich him, stimulating in private school. All these things, parents are trying to change their kids' intelligence. Then there's happiness. Even the biggest hippie parents say, I don't care about success, man. I just care about whether my kid's happy. All right, so that's another thing parents are trying to affect in their kids. Different theories about how you make them happy. One theory is you make your kids happy by being nice to them, saying, I love you. Another theory is you must never show love because otherwise they will be lazy and they will not achieve success. And so you have to control your desire to tell your children that you love them, and instead just say no, right? Be mean to them, and then eventually they'll be really happy. Different theories, but the goal is still there. Even the biggest tiger mom still says, in the long run, they'll be happier because I was so mean. All right, then success. Yes, most parents want their kids to get standard, braggable success for their kids. It varies as to how into this they are, but parents like their kids to get a lot of money, to get good grades in school, to go and get high levels of education. These are normal things that parents are trying to affect. And on the negative side, parents generally don't want their kids to end up in jail. Right? Then there's character. So by character, I mean these are these are basically values that almost everyone agrees on. Not 100%, but almost everyone. Almost everyone wants their kids to be kind. Almost everyone wants their kids to be hardworking. There's a few weird people who don't, but it's a generally desired thing. Then values, this is what I call the controversial stuff. This is one where Christians want their kids to be Christian, but atheists want their kids to be atheists. Democrats want their kids to be Democrats. Republicans want their kids to be Republicans, and so on. So that's another category. And the last one's what I call appreciation, basically the quality of the relationship between parent and child, how your child feels about you. The quick punchline of all the research, and if you read the book, you can go and get all the references, and you can read the original articles. They're somewhat technical, but I think you really only need like first-year statistics to understand most of the research, honestly, because it's fairly intuitive. So the main results, parents have little or no long-run effect on the following: health, intelligence, happiness, success, or character. Even family resemblance in income. The idea if I grow up in a rich family, I'll be rich, poor family, I'll be poor. Even that stems almost entirely from heredity. There's a fantastic study of Korean war orphans that got adopted by American families. This was back when adoption standards were more relaxed, and so you only had to be 25% above the poverty line to adopt. And so these Korean orphans got adopted into a huge range of family incomes. And when they came back and looked at those orphans when they were 30, the income of the kids adopted by the very richest families equaled the income of the kids adopted by the very poorest families. I'm only a messenger. Now, where does parenting matter? So parents have a strong long-run effect on what I call superficial values. What are superficial values? Superficial value is if someone says, "What's your religion?" you give the same answer as your parents give. So Zoroastrian. My parents are Zoroastrian, I'm Zoroastrian. And similarly for politics, like my mom's a Democrat, I'm a Democrat. So there it really is true if you get adopted into a Christian Democratic family, there is a high probability, much above chance, that as an adult, when someone says, "What party do you belong to? What religion do you believe in?" you'll say Christian Democrat. All right. However, if you look at deeper measures of religion and politics, like actual church attendance, agreement with church doctrine, or deeper measures of politics, like whether you even bother to vote for that party, whether you agree with the ideological positions of that group, those again turned out to have very little nurture effect, and it's much more about genetics. And if you find it hard to believe, like there's a gene for the believing in the death penalty, it's like just think about all the people you know who like the death penalty and don't. They got very different personalities. And if you can believe that personality's got a genetic component, you looked at dogs, and how dogs have different personalities, and it's like it's a Doberman Pinscher. You already know what personality that Pinscher's gonna have, right? There's some variation, but still, it's like, it's a killer dog. Scary. All right. So, the most meaningful effect of parenting is this. Parents do have a long-run effect on their children's appreciation. If you actually never meet your kid, they won't love you. If you are kind to them, spend time with them, they are notably more likely to actually say that, and this is even if they're adopted rather than biological. You do have a good amount of influence over the quality of the relationship by being a good present person and doing things with them or not. So that's what I say is really the most meaningful part of being a parent, is just that bond. It is not that you are transforming the child, it's rather that you have a connection with them. An analogy I like is someone who gets married with the plan of changing their spouse, it's a bad plan. A good marriage is based upon enjoying life together, not here's my plan for turning this sucky person into someone who's good and worthy to be married to me. All right. Now we come to why is an economist even working on this? So when I read this, I said, so this is useful information for making optimal decisions. And this is the way that I think about life as an economist. It's not just about textbook stuff, and it's not just about policy making. Economics is the science of self-help, or at least one of the sciences of self-help. Economics is what teaches you to walk out of a bad movie. Sunk cost fallacy. Look it up if you aren't familiar with it. All right, so there are two big life lessons, which in my mind, they're simple, but they are transformative. And the first life lesson is just lighten up. All this helicopter parenting, tiger momming, it is just based on a false theory of child development, which we can show is wrong. All right, so if there is something that you're doing for your kid, you don't like it, they don't like it, the whole rationale is, I have to do it for their future, you can almost certainly stop. It is not true. When this book came out, there was a piece that came out as a letter from mom, and it was on the theme of what I call soccer as contraception. And the mom just said, well, we got 2 kids, they're both in soccer, and taking these kids to soccer games completely takes over our lives. We thought about having a 3rd child, but then there'd be 3 sets of soccer games, 3 sets of practices. And then I think she said, well, we thought about, how about we have a 3rd kid and then don't worry about soccer? That's crazy. The kid will be a criminal loser if they don't get their soccer. And basically what I'm doing is I am saying, let's reverse that reasoning and say, since she didn't want to have a 3rd kid because she didn't want to do the soccer, I'm saying if you're in her situation, do have the 3rd kid and then don't bother with the soccer. All right, so stop making investments that don't pay. So focus on enjoying the journey, not on molding your child into your preferred shape. So that's the first lesson. It basically is economics. If there's an investment that does not pay, stop. It's not really an investment. All right, but then here is the second life lesson, which is the one that has gotten me the most flack, even though it is so obviously true. I don't think it can really be denied. And it's, look, once you change your parenting style to be in accordance with what we know about human development, then reconsider the size of your family and whether you've actually done the optimal thing. The best number of kids to have, if you have to go and spend 15 hours per week per child on their activities, is different from the optimal number of kids to have if you only need to spend 1 hour a week on their preferred activities, right? Obviously. Right? So an economist call moving along the demand curve. Over there, I've got a little one where we've got quantity of kids on the x-axis and the effective price of kids, including time and not just money, on the y-axis. And then at the top, there is the number of kids to have if you think that helicopter parenting actually works like people imagine. And then the larger number, which is the dot on the right, is what you should do if I'm actually right. All right. So the kids you want are cheaper than you think, so stock up. The way that I think about it is that the evidence is a coupon for kids. It's like 25% off. If you just don't like kids at all, and someone gives you the coupon for kids 25% off, and it's like, all right, fine, whatever. Doesn't matter. Right? I actually have gotten an irate phone call from a childless cat woman who did call me up and start yelling at me and said, like, you said that my life is miserable, and I didn't say any of those things. And he says, like, I'm super happy with my childless life. And they're like, you don't sound very happy. It almost sounds like Charles Darwin is screaming at you to change your life. But anyway, like, if she was actually happy, my book is not there to go and nag her to do something different, to say, all right, fine. You don't like kids at all? Whatever. It's just like someone who doesn't like chocolate at all. But on the other hand, if you like chocolate and you get a coupon, it's a reason to think about buying some more, maybe a lot more. Next slide. All right, so caveats. Right. This is what academics talk about when they say, look, is it what I told you exactly true? Well, I was simplifying because I only have a few minutes, and now I'm going to tell you some of the things that you should regard as at least warnings so that we can be accurate. This is one of the problems I had with the 4 talks last night is I didn't hear any caveats. You need caveats. Caveats are what keep us from being totally wrong about stuff. All right, so what researchers find does depend upon where they look. Twin adoption research, as far as I know, there has never been a twin adoption study done outside of the first world. So that's very important if you are using this to make conclusions about international development. But for parenting advice, that's okay, because I assume no one here was wondering, what would happen to my kids if I abandoned them in Haiti? I wonder how that would work out. All right. So now, after I wrote the book, I did discover there is literature on international adoption, and especially international adoption by age. And it turns out that international adoption from very poor countries to rich countries is a dramatic enough change to permanently and substantially improve height, weight, head circumference, IQ, and so on. So this is very important, for example, if you're worried about low IQ immigration, because it's like, well, their kids would probably have a higher IQ if they didn't grow up in Malawi. So let's keep that in mind. All right. But anyway, so here is a rule of thumb that I offer. If an adoption agency would consider the parents fit to adopt, then what you're doing is fine. Otherwise, maybe you should be worried, but probably that's not relevant here. And last point. So if your demand for kids is vertical at Q equals 0, if you just have no interest in kids, I'm guessing there's not many such people here. But see, my answer to them is like, peace, I'm not going to bother you. I'm going to talk to people that actually like the product I'm offering. Thank you. All right. And do we have any more time, or am I all out of time? Do we have time for a couple questions? Yes. All right. Yes, in the front, please. Oh, yeah. So Plomin actually wrote a blurb for the book, and he said it was the best book on behavioral genetics. And I'm like, yes, Robert Plomin likes my book. So yes. Yes. So I never said can't. I said don't. Don't and can't are, that's an important distinction, actually. Yes. So like you definitely can, but what it's saying is that within the range of what we see in first world countries, whether you grow up with a very poor family or very rich family is not changing your life expectancy, either directly or even indirectly by changing your dietary habits or your smoking or anything else like that. Yes, over there, please. So that one definitely gets less studied. What I say, the main thing that we know there is that people forget almost everything they learn. So it's just really hard to actually teach anybody anything. Anyone here who is an educator, if you've ever talked to your student a month or 6 months or a year after the exam and just face-palmed that they don't seem to remember anything at all. I remember when I was teaching in Italy, and part of my strategy is, even though I'm speaking English, I learn the native terms for the key phrases. So, vantaggio comparato is Italian for comparative advantage. And when I ask the students, so you know about vantaggio comparato? And all the students are like, huh, what? And then the Italian professor in the back starts yelling at them, we talked about this for a month, the last thing you asked, wrong with you, only forgotten vantaggio comparato. What's wrong with you? So, yes, definitely there are some things where parents manage to say, like, this is where grandma's house was, and you remember that. But in terms of the things that we measure with standardized tests, yeah, even that, it's just not that much. Way in the back, please. Sorry, speak up. Yes. So let's see, I don't remember anything specifically on that. The main issue, as usual, is that families that send their kids to boarding school are not randomly selected. They're generally rich families. So, like, the observed thing would be if you go to boarding schools, you generally turn out much better than average, but what you really want would be the random variation where two siblings, one gets sent and one doesn't, and that actually, unlike adoption sometimes really is random. We just send, you get baby A, you get baby B. Boarding schools are not going to be like that. So normally this work is basically just saying, like, everything that money affects put together, we can't see that effect. It does leave open the possibility there are certain things that actually are what I call magic bullets, where if you just did that, pressed that exact button, that would have a dramatic effect. It's just really hard to find those things, but it's logically possible that they exist. Yes? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. So well, exactly. So like when I talk about people's demand is Q equals 0 at all prices, that's someone who says, I don't care whether it's like $1 to raise a kid to adulthood and like 5 minutes of my time, I just dislike children. There are some people like that. I'm frightened of them, but they do exist. But let's see, your first question again was, yes. So like the peer effects. So if you know Judith Harris's book, The Nurture Assumption, I say this is the main problem with her book, is she said, look, it's not family but peers. Here's the problem. The family you grow up with has a big effect on who your peers are. If you get adopted by a rich family, that doesn't just mean that you directly have a rich family, it also means you're going to have richer peers. And the way that researchers measure these things is if having rich peers actually change your adult outcomes, then that would actually get sucked up into the nurture part of the equation. And so these results about lack of effect of nurture are much stronger than Harris actually was suggesting. Now, the point that she makes in the book, which is good, is if you have a really dramatic change, such that like you move to a kibbutz in Israel, right? Or you just move your kid to another country, yeah, that changes because they're going to be able to speak a different language as long as they go early enough. So there are changes that are so far outside the realm of what we're talking about where that would work. And again, it's like if you're thinking about moving to another country, like that's the kind of thing that's probably big enough that it would actually change your child permanently. And then it's like, well, do I want that? Or if I want to move to a commune, maybe that could well be big enough. But within this very broad range of things that make it into the data set, that's what this is all about. And like I said, like we've got this other body of evidence saying that third world orphanages are terrible and would mess up almost anybody for life. Way in the back there. So doomed is, again, way too strong. But yeah, one of the hardest things I ever got was a call on a radio show where mom said, yeah, my kid's dad's in jail. What's going to happen to my kids? And I'm like, well, there's a lot of papers saying that criminality is highly hereditary. That's not my fault. I'm only a messenger. The main thing I could say is that, first of all, like really extreme criminality is, of course, super rare. So, Charles Manson's kids, if he had any kids, I haven't heard of them starting cults and murdering people. But it still probably is true that they have like 10 times the propensity for that. So yeah, it is one where like if you thought that, so let's see, if you thought that Huntington's disease was environmental and then you find out that it's actually heritable and that your kid will have it, I can totally understand not wanting to have kids in that case because it's like, oh, this is nothing I can prevent by changing my behavior. Again, fortunately, that's not very many people. But yeah, the way that I put it is, if you're satisfied with yourself, then you should expect to be satisfied with your kids. And the main thing you can do to get better kids is to find a partner that is like the kids you want to have. Not just physically, but psychologically too. Yeah, so economist Greg Clark has stuff on this, but specifically for success. And what it says is that suppose you have a Nobel Prize winning guy, and then he has a son who works in a gas station. What can we predict about the grandson of that Nobel Prize winner? And the answer is he is a lot more likely to win a Nobel Prize than a normal son of a guy who works in a gas station, right? And I'm just a messenger. Yes, actually that is a great point of besides going and changing your spouse, you could go and select the embryos. And yes, so man with a plan. Thank you. All right, let's see, are we out of time? Or can we keep going? 3 minutes, all right, let's do it. All right, 3 more minutes of questions, please. Yes, over there, please. No. International adoption does have a big effect. That's the extreme treatment. It's whether you get adopted between like a rich family and a poor family in the U.S. Yes. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yes. So basically, like if you're in an orphanage in Chad, you really want to get adopted by an American, but it doesn't matter that much which American. Yep. And again, the idea is, look, environment, of course, upbringing matters, but it's the magnitude and how extreme the environmental change has to be in order for the change to actually in order for the change to be noticeable. And the answer is it's got to be at that level of moving from life in the third world to life in the first world, which is a big change. But on the other hand, getting adopted by one family in the U.S. versus another really does not seem to change your adult outcomes. Again, with those certain exceptions. This does not mean it's that you shouldn't be nice to your kids and show them love, because that's something that you really do affect. And the way that I like to describe it when I was arguing with the Tiger Mom is not only are you not really succeeding in making them rich and get into Yale and so on through your efforts, but also you are messing up the thing that you really do affect, which is the quality of the relationship, which is what her own book says. Right. So actually, so the main thing there is like that it's easy to get short-run gains, and short-run gains are good gains, by the way. Right? If you say, well, in the long run, it doesn't matter that you lost 2 years from COVID, you'll just be as happy in 20 years. It's like, yeah, but I lost 2 years, so that's bad. So, definitely nothing, I'm fully supportive of doing things to improve your life. It's just, is this having some big additional long-run effect? And that's probably not. Okay, so I'm being told to cut it off. So thank you much. You are great. And for all of you with kids, thank you for your service.